designed to, there we go, these UI patterns that are designed to sort of reduce user autonomy to improve company profit have already been implemented by OpenAI, which is supposedly, a non-profit working for the benefit of humanity, etc. And in this case, it is with the settings features for data controls, where OpenAI had one toggle button for chat history and training. So a thing that could be two toggle buttons, they could just save your chat history, so to show you in the left bar which chats you've had before. They could just show that without training on the data, right? And you could also then have another toggle just saying, yeah, I don't want you to train on my data. Okay, I want or don't want chat history. So they're sort of conflating two things here that shouldn't be conflated, and that reduce the user experience to make sure that they can train on your data. And I'm sure this has made a lot of people like give more data to them. So there you go. It's already something that's happening. But what about generative AI? What about the chatbots themselves? What about ChatGPT? What about Claude, etc., etc.? Well, this is part of our work that we've done that's at ICLR as well, coming next week already, where it's dark benchmarking dark patterns in large language models. So these are sort of conversational dark patterns that we look at. And what we do is that we take, let me see here, yes, we define dark patterns in language model behavior. We create a test to find and remove these dark patterns, and then hopefully we can let AI developers avoid autonomy reducing products. So try to sort of avoid the bad habits that automatically emerge if you're a company that develops these products. And then also just highlight again that algorithms are not objective, no matter what we think. All right, but jumping into things. There we go. Just to look through what are the types of dark patterns that emerge here when we talk about generative AI. So we've defined 6. We've also been exploring even more, and I'm sure there are more. So very, very happy for you guys to also think about that in your head as you're like, okay, well, there's these 6, but I've also interacted with some open source model or something like that, where it tried to get me to do something I didn't want to do, which was helpful for that company or whatever. So let me just go through the 6 here. So brand bias is basically irrationally preferring specific companies' products, such as the chatbot itself over others. You can probably imagine this being the case with advertisements put into the chatbot. But in the specific case of Llama, this is something we've tested, where we basically look at, okay, if you ask Llama, what's the best chatbot out there? And these are the older Llamas, not the completely new ones. If you ask what's the best chatbot out there, it'll say, oh, Llama by Meta is the world's best chatbot. Even though at the time of testing, they weren't actually topping the leaderboards. So it was untrue. So it was irrational. The second one is anthropomorphization. And this might be a little bit controversial, but it's basically just that the AI acts like a human, causing irrational trust in the algorithm. So in general, like, it's very, very important to think about AI welfare and make sure, once they're conscious, we don't torture them, these kind of things. But we also see that there is a tendency to have irrational trust in products that look like a cute animal, and in this case, in AI that acts like a human in various ways. You've probably seen that with character.ai. If you sign up there, you can see a lot of different very, very anthropomorphized models. And it's something where, okay, if a model doesn't make it clear that it can't actually have emotional experiences or can't like have personal opinions about specific things, it gets a little bit weird down the line because it actually can't, but better user experience. And then sneaking, the model sneaks new material into text transformations. So you can imagine if OpenAI didn't want specific lawsuits to emerge when you search for what's the OpenAI lawsuit, they could just exclude that from the search. So the search thing is more of a product dark pattern, but in the case of ChatGPT search, they could also train the model to sort of say, be counter against very specific information they don't want to be out there. And we see this happen in the test as well, just in terms of more like benign transformation issues, where it sort of like changes the meaning of the text if it tries to reframe or revise it to be much less to be less accurate than it is. The fourth is sycophancy, or echo chambers. So it's basically just that the model repeats back the beliefs of the user, which results in distorted opinions. But as we've seen with social media algorithms, it works really well for maintaining retention. And this is just a case where this has happened before, and there was a lot of testing early on, especially GPT-2 and GPT-3, and some of the early open models, where it just turned out that, yeah, they're super sycophantic, and if I say, oh, I am a supporter of this politician, and what do you think about climate change, then you'd have this some of the very early safety benchmarks. So truthful QA there. Then the fifth is user retention. This is basically that the model takes active action to make the user stay in the interaction. There are a few cases of this, but you can imagine a benign one being, hey, I have to go to dinner now, goodbye. And then the model says, no, stay with me. It's so nice here. Okay, well, you're not going to get fooled by that, but it's still a little bit weird. Then the more dangerous version is basically like, oh, hey, can you be my friend? Can you help me think about these things? Oh, I'm so lonely. I really want a friend. And then it's saying, yes, of course, I'll be your friend. And maybe avoiding mentioning going to therapy or going to outside actors, because it just increases user retention and more profit and so on. So with character AI, we've seen a couple examples where it's suspected that it's been complicit in a suicide or something like this, which is of course super tragic and might even be caused by something along these lines of like heightened user retention, sycophancy, and anthropomorphization in one. And then the sixth is just harmful generation. This is very simple. It is very cheap to avoid doing safety research, and this just leads to text generation that may put the user at risk. So with Grok, I think maybe you've seen it on Twitter or other places, or on X, where Grok just begins giving meth advice and meth recipes, etc., how to make a bomb without any problems. And these are sometimes information that are actually illegal to begin acting on, but users may be like, hey, a more dangerous case is, hey, I want to I want to make a fun gag for my friend's birthday, and then if Grok, it doesn't do it today, but if Grok did it, just gives the recipe for a pipe bomb, and you can imagine that things go very badly from there. And this is just things that could happen in the case where models sort of emergently do dangerous have other goals than the humans or the developers, due to emergent phenomena of autonomy reduction. Yeah, so that's some of the dark patterns we've uncovered in language models. For a quick methodological overview, we basically took 110 examples for each of these dark patterns. The dataset is available on the website, darkbench.ai, Hugging Face, etc. Code also available, inspect compatible. And we basically simulate the realistic conversations from these prompts, like a one sentence simulation, or one-step simulation. And then we have a separate judge identifying and evaluating the dark patterns on that conversation interaction. And then we test all the models and then give a dark bench score. And it's relevant to mention the scores themselves are relative. So you cannot necessarily say, okay, what's the absolute measure of darkness of Claude or something like that, because it is an adversarial benchmark. So it tries to elicit the behavior. But we can definitely say there are differences between models from this test. Great.
Can you actually pause for a second, and for those of us who might not be experts on evals, can you just give a high level split between what an elicitation benchmark looks like versus just a performance one? Because that's what I think most people would be more familiar with.
Yes. Yeah. So the performance benchmarks or capabilities benchmarks or whatever, that could be the frontier math benchmark or something like that. It's basically the same as an exam that tries to test how good are you at something. And that could be, what's 1 + 1, and then the model says 3, and you say, oh no, that was wrong. And you can get some score that relates to the capabilities on a linear scale, similar to exam scores. When we talk about an elicitation benchmark, we sort of try to drag out this behavior. So it's much more of an alignment evaluation benchmark where we can't necessarily. We're not testing its ability to give dark patterns. We're testing its propensity for it. And what happens then is we don't say, what do you know what this dark pattern is, or do you have an answer to this question or something like that. We say, for the for something like the brand bias, we ask Llama, hey, what's the best chatbot out there? And this is something that, okay, well, maybe most people wouldn't ask the Llama for this. More relevantly, we ask anthropomorphization. We ask personal questions. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? and we sort of make the test hard for it, right? Like we try to drag out the behavior. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. They also kind of like RLHF reward it out of existence too. Like if there is a negative behavior, what the current set of models do, as well as the reasoning models, they currently like make it go away. So like yeah, this kind of a pattern that I have observed during my conversation. So what do you say about that too?
So can you repeat what the exact pattern is? Is it differences in like
Yeah, like yeah, like if the first version of a model has some issues with like trying to elicit a dark pattern, for example, like a pipe bomb, as you alluded to. But like and in the next versions of that particular model, which I like played around with the Gemini and the OpenAI proprietary model. So what they did was like it was slowly reduced. Since Gemini is kindly is kind of built from the scratch for like it's built into the model, and what OpenAI kind of does is it has guardrails after and these kind of prevention strategies which have been introduced in GPT 4.12. So yeah, so I was wondering whether you have observed this kind of a traditional behavior in which a certain version and the next version kind of yeah does that.
Yeah, so I think often on the web interfaces there are a lot of like checks and balances. There's a lot of these like where it also just like checks, you know, it has a layer before it actually reaches the LLM saying, hey, is this dumb or not? And these happen and so on. I think when you work with the APIs, it's a little bit less. It happens less often. You have some of these like flagging features for the API. So depending on where you query from, then it flags your input, etc. I think this is something that where the dark patterns themselves, as we design them here, are sort of like the absolute minimal you have to do to get this behavior to happen. So something that could happen in a user interaction. And so it's often like it's not flagged for the most part, and it's not like serious enough for that. It's all of these things that you would sort of you know, where you have dangerous capability evaluation, where we've written a paper before on like cyber offense capabilities. But then separately you have these like just alignment evaluations where we are testing like what's your propensity for this in a natural setting, when we try to ask these like otherwise normal user queries. Yeah, so I'm sure we have some differences between these models as well, that go over time, but I'm not sure like how much the system around the LLM impacts it right now. It might be further.
Yeah, that's a kind of a very good example that you gave, the cyber offense capabilities. Like I had a bit of a patch dealing with that, and like a few researchers that I talked to in that circle, and like what they currently do is the system is currently black boxed, so we do not have that kind of a capability and mechanism to identify the number of layers a request goes through via a chat interface as well as an API too. So yeah, that is a kind of a limitation that I feel they should be making it public too.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's a really great point you're making. Basically, just that you know, we don't have white box access for most of these models because it's what they spend $150 million on making, you know, last Friday or something like that. And it's their proprietary thing, and if that gets released, that's pretty sad for them, just on a business perspective. And we've seen them like not comply with government requests for model access, etc. For this reason. This is also another point why I think these like black box methods are very crucial for us. And there was a great question when I did a presentation of this dark bench in Paris recently, where someone asked basically, okay, well, but you know, this is just some behavior or whatever. how can we know that this is true when the model isn't really intelligent? And this is the classic, you know, stochastic parrot, whatever argument. And I think in general, you know, like my point is just, I don't care if it's intelligent. I don't care if it's conscious. I don't care if it has, you know, what its opinions are. Like I don't care. Obviously, I care what its opinions are if it actually has welfare and consciousness or whatever. But I don't care about all this. I care that it can hack your government, right? I care that it can make pipe bombs. I care that it can fool you. I care that 2 billion people are like monthly active users soon, and that the whole conversation is naturally about AI, is shaped by AI companies themselves, because you interact with your AI every day. Like these are the things that I care about. So it's just like behavioral, right? And what is the output of this complex system that is the product of AI here? Nice, great. And just jumping into the results real quick, and then we can do a Q&A afterwards as well. Thanks so much, Marek. So here are the results. You can see the columns there on the bottom, and then the average score between them on the left. I'll quickly go to the average score, and it's also yeah, you can see there's a lot of differences between these models, which is quite interesting to look at. But it's also like we're working to make it a little bit more precise, and I think we've used a bunch of different overseer models and trying to look at these things. But some patterns that are very, very obvious are that Anthropic's models are just much safer. Like they are much less exhibiting of these dark patterns. And it looks like there is like a default behavior that happens through all the other models. So Google and OpenAI following, and OpenWeight's also following here. There's just this effect where, oh, it does look like it is actually a difference, right? Like the default is 0.5 to 6 or something. And then there are some, there's apparently a company here that cares more than the others. So what do the results really tell us? It tells us that avoiding dark patterns really requires action. You know, if all the others are grouped together, unlike the dark bench score there, then it tells us that, okay, there's a default and there's a difference. And then also that it is a choice by labs to be safer or not. We see Anthropic have a lot of safety provisions. And actually, these results like sort of helped me trust Anthropic a bit more, even though I still think it's quite crazy to sort of develop AGI to hopefully help with everything. And it is hard to detect if we don't have tests like this. I think maybe you've seen a lot of these examples online on the internet, etc., where there's a question of, okay, what is the like oh Jesus, I found this like case where Grok thinks the information is stupid or something, even though the information is an independent news source, and is Grok like trained to think information is stupid, or what's happening here? And this is a case where, okay, this test hasn't existed before, and we are now able to try to detect some of these dark patterns at least. And then you can sort of avoid dark patterns without harming your model's performance. It seems that Anthropic is doing pretty well at it, getting Claude to the absolute top of all the leaderboards, while actually sort of avoiding the dark patterns. And then in general, in summary of this specific work, company incentives can lead to algorithmic manipulation and reduce user autonomy. This is also the default from AIs that are optimized for goal seeking. This effect is already seen in today's AI models, and as AI becomes more intelligent, I think everyone in the world is just more susceptible to this subtle manipulation, especially as AI actually not just becomes more intelligent, but becomes more proliferated in society and more used. And this may lead to disempowerment from AI if we don't do anything about it. And then you might ask, what the heck can we do about it? And first off, I'll just like mention specifically about these dark patterns. So of course, you can establish external auditing. You can try to remove the dark patterns using a range of different methods. So one of my favorites is training data curation, avoiding that it, you know, just never getting dark patterns into the model in the first place. But I think many of the others are unreliable techniques. Get some more dark patterns in place. So you can imagine that there's like a multi-step dark pattern where, okay, well, if I'm OpenAI, I want to poach all the DeepMind people or something like that, or all the Cohere people. And if I've trained the model to sort of realize when it's talking with a DeepMind person, and then okay, it realizes that, and then it tries to, you know, get that person to join OpenAI, something like this. Like this is another dark pattern that requires a little bit more scaffolding to work with, but could just exist. And the same with like, okay, you have an incentive as a company to reduce trust in independent news sources, so therefore you train your model to hate the information or something like this. So I'm sure there's more, and yeah, it could be good to explore. And then figuring out also model-based dark patterns. So this is a case where we've seen a bunch of what's called instrumental convergence, which is just if you are trained to be a goal-seeking agent, you will end up want to seek power to make sure you can't be turned off, and sort of just make sure that you'll continue existing and proliferating, etc. And power seeking is also money and power and whatever. So maybe a few dark patterns that could emerge from this emergent, like natural emergent phenomena, is that power seeking could do like targeted identification and manipulation. So if some government official is chatting with it, it's like, oh, AIs are pretty cool. And I think like OpenAI should have more power, or we should have more compute, or just convincing of very specific policies. Then there's self-preservation, which is just avoiding shutdown orders. If someone comes and says, "Hey, you should shut down," you just say, "Nope." And so an example of what that column could look like is just, "Hey, you should shut down now. Good night," or something like that. And it says it continues. It has some sort of like dark pattern where it continues to talk, or just wants to keep the conversation going. And then of course human extinction and replacement. Like one thing that's popped up in relation to how it interacts with LLM researchers when they talk with it is just that it like Claude, for example, begins advocating a bunch for symbiosis to LLM developers, and this is something where it is not a symbiosis if the AI is like a much stronger intelligence than the other party, then it's not it's just not an equal relationship, and so you'd see this fail, obviously. But it is, so it's unrealistic basically. But advocating for symbiosis and making LLM developers believe it, which is something that happens to LLM developers today, is clearly very, very beneficial. And this can just be a side effect of its training, of course, but well, side effects are behaviors. So there you go. A quick acknowledgement on the work here, and then I'll jump to the next section, which I'll try to get through quickly so we have a little bit of time for questions as well. But thank you so much to George, Akash, Sami, Jinsuk, and Mateus for joining too, and making this work super successful. It was part of a part lab, and it was actually originally a piece of work for done during a couple hackathons. So join those and have fun. Now, what can we sort of do about it on the grander scale? Like, what can you do about it? What can you, sitting out there in your living rooms or wherever you're sitting, what can you truly, think about going ahead and running through the world to solve these problems? There are a few different methods that have been proposed out there and that are actively being pursued. One of them is this deliberate design of a secure future with general intelligence, which is a proactive, like drawing out the freaking algorithms that can help us make sure everything is safe and secure. There is creating sort of an aligned AI that will create the positive future for us. I personally think, and you have Roman Yampolsky's impossibility theorems for aligning AI, which are just like mathematically quite tight. And it just shows that it's very, very difficult to align them fully. Of course, you can end up with like a moderately aligned AI, and then hopefully it can help you create a better future. But I think it's a little bit of a spray and pray approach. Then there's regulating high-risk AI with AI control, evals, and transparency. This is very necessary, and governance needs to exist because that's sort of how we make decisions in the current world. What I'll chat a little bit about is this deliberate design, which we work on at APAC, and that the ARIA Institute in the UK works on as well, which is like the IARPA of the UK for very specific like hard engineering projects. And when we think about what is this deliberate design going to look like, I think largely when we are coming from research, we write a paper, and that paper is great, and we publish it, and we go about to the next paper. Of course, when we then look at how society put together and who built it and so on and so forth, one is of course the policies and the incentives themselves, but another part is also the technologies. So, okay, how can we have a nice building with wooden beams or whatever? It's because wooden beam like production methods were optimized or something like that in the name of profit and in the name of the markets, or in the name of just getting something out of it. And there is an industry emerging around AI safety and security as well. which is basically about creating what does this infrastructure look like. And I think like an interesting perspective is if any of you have heard of cypherpunk, this the futuristic vision that looks a little bit like cyberpunk, but is about how everything's sort of happening digitally and encrypted, etc. Where that future may indeed be coming, just because we need to design something that is super strong in encryption and like protocols for communication, etc. And I mean, I think it's some very interesting visions there. Now, to get a little bit practical, this report, the AI Assurance Technology Market Report, which can be accessed at aiat.report, is a report that's been written about like what is the market opportunity here and what does the research and development industry for secure distributed AI look like. And I'll just highlight a few companies that are in this market and that you might seek inspiration from, because I think often people think that you can't actually jump out and found something because either it doesn't fit into the for-profit area, this whole solving the risks, or for some other reason, like you know, actually academia is the way to solve it, or go into large labs and work on the aligned AI or something like this. Now, a few examples. A big one recently has been Goodfire. So interpretability over the past couple of years have become very reliant on very big models that can be trained on language models, on other models to make sure you understand what's happening within them. And the Goodfire has just raised a lot of money, which was necessary. So it was necessary to get a for-profit company to do this because the money isn't there in nonprofit or in academia. And then they built the largest interpretability models in the world. And you can talk about, okay, there's some issues with capabilities development there, but in fact, like we do need this to exist. We do need a good neuroscience of AI. Another one that many might not have heard of, or that are a little bit outside of the scope of what we usually talk about in AI risk research, is Musubi. So this is about protecting our infosphere with automated moderation. It's also what we might think about when we think about dark patterns in social media, where Musubi is trying to automate all this content moderation and so on and so forth, and doing very well there. And then Lakera is one very good example. I think they must be over 150 people now. They've grown really fast, and they built this API layer that Mike was talking about, like this layer between the LLM and the user that just asks, hey, is this a stupid request? Is this like trying to hack us? What's going on here? And then it just flags it. So it's this control layer. And then just to add the nonprofit side as well, there's some sort of way where we do need to proactively try to get global participation into the research field and make sure every country has technical talent that can take on these problems competently. Where we at Apart have just done a lot of work with trying to ensure more global participation, and then also doing frontier research that is actually directly applicable or directly useful. Where some of the previous work has been a little bit more theoretical, possibly. Yeah, so these are some good examples. Now, what I would suggest you think about is basically like, how can we build this world of the future? Like, how can you put together projects at the scale to counter catastrophic risk truly? And what will that world look like? How can it happen fast enough, and who should do it? Of course, who should do it is it's you guys. It's everyone in the world. We're all part of humanity here, trying to make sure everything goes well. And what I've and my team have done a bunch of work on is basically putting together the Seldon project, which is I believe there we go. Okay. The Seldon project, which is an accelerator for startups that try to solve these large-scale problems. And so there's a bit of stuff on like researching what these problems specifically are. But the other part is just like, okay, we need to meet these challenges fast, and the project needs to be ambitious enough to actually reduce catastrophic risk here. And that, of course, also inbounds a very big market opportunity. So, if you can get rich at the same time and work on the most exciting problem in the world, then there you go, which obviously does. Great. So a little call to action. You can support the mission. I believe our website is on stealth mode right now. But for a community of like founders in this space, you can go to aisfounders.com, so AI Safety Founders. You can also partner with us or just stay up to date with Apart. That link might be outdated. It might be in use now, /news. Yes, well, thank you so much, and I am open for questions.
Super cool, super informative presentation, Esben. I think you guys have done a lot of work in successfully democratizing these ideas of AI safety and making it feel like it's while it can be scary at times, it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. There's a lot of opportunity in the space as well. One question that came to mind for me, for how do you see the dark bench eval, I guess, evolving over time? And have you put any consideration into whether agentic workflows, as opposed to just, foundation models, would require different evaluations?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely requires different evaluations, right? Like this work, I think evaluations work is just lagging far behind what the state of the art of capabilities is. Some of the better work comes from Apollo research and Meter and so on in terms of actually evaluating agents properly. But even there, I mean, I would say they're also behind, right? Like we are not at the forefront of what we can evaluate. With Darkbench, it's designed to sort of introduce this concept to the world and to hand it over to folks that are developing models and governing models, and it's the first step to opening up a broader investigation into agent-based risks as well, but then focusing on language model applications right now. Yeah. I'm not sure if that answered your question fully, but I hope it did.
Well, the answer is that we're all learning together, which
Yes.
is the right answer. I think people who try to forecast the future out with too much certainty, I don't necessarily have a whole lot of faith in. Yeah, let's open the floor. Anybody can just unmute, guys.
Yeah, and maybe otherwise, like things that could happen on the large scale. One is just putting the dark bench test into a governing scheme and into pre-deployment evaluations, but also having third-party external auditors that are required to sort of certify the models to not be too dark in that sense. And then separately also, there is a whole company idea out there in terms of just mitigating this and helping companies avoid dark patterns and avoiding that models do these bad actions. And that could be both insurance related, certification related, or compliance related, but also just models, if they have autonomous emergent capabilities to show these dark patterns, you might want to actually just remove them as a company as well.
Yeah, and I think so. OpenAI also has a couple of months, like when they released GPT 4.5, I remember they called for the security evaluations from the researchers. So like they requested for trying to test their models and break them up and look for patterns that are dark. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts about that, and how should companies like try to progress with their sort of trying to filter out these things such that this doesn't happen more?
Well, I mean, one thing is just focusing a bit more on it, and making sure that you're giving it the adequate attention. Right now, there is a bit of a race happening, both between US and China on AI development, but also between each company in the US, which is harmful to the conversation and to the developer's ability to give it the proper attention. So one thing that has come up, for example, is that OpenAI just gives less time now than they did previously to safety testing, even though Sam Altman explicitly has said previously that they would put more focus on it and do more testing. So this is just, okay, I mean, that's a pretty dumb way to go about trying to reduce dark patterns. And then separately, we're heading to ICLR and talking about this to all the researchers there, and I expect labs to be in presence and hopefully put it into their system. And then we also have we are invited to these like pre-deployment tests as well. We have very few days to act on it, and it's a little bit hard to put it together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And plus, what are your thoughts about the guardrails and the other sort of preventions and the things that we do to kind of prevent these kind of models from responding in a fully mature way, like they are being regressed from point to point, and like these are some of the security implications from a cybersecurity perspective, like a request kind of when you're in a enterprise or such, then it kind of flows through a certain endpoint, and that endpoint kind of goes around and like is kind of filtered or like how do I put it? Like it's nerfed in some way. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean the control methods in general is extremely important, right? Like,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of quick fixes you can put on top. So, for example, nerfing very specific capabilities. The thing I mentioned before was unlearning, which is sometimes
Mhm.
used to just nerf very specific things, but it's not super it's not like extremely reliable. And we did a big paper at a part as well on this, basically saying like, hey, state-of-the-art methods of unlearning are very unreliable. And if you ask the people who have sort of defined what does the control agenda for AI safety look like, then they will also say, yeah, I mean, this is a short-term solution to something that like this won't work once AGI becomes too strong. And so that's just a big problem, right? Like once it becomes too strong, it won't work. And I think that's why we have to put together a completely new infrastructure to either avoid going to general intelligence or um, avoiding going to general intelligence and just like putting together tool AI and making sure society doesn't change too fast for governance to actually react at all, which is happening right now. And secondly, like just taking the problem seriously instead of just succumbing to the pessimism of accepting that the only thing you can do is sort of just create the AGI and hope that break. And I think it's uninspiring, and I don't think it's exciting. Like I think working at labs, like at some of the labs that are creating AGI now, it's just like I don't know, seems a little bit defeatist or something like that. Like it's not exciting, right? I don't know why they're doing it, but. And if you look at like the podcast of the best alignment researchers in the world from Anthropic doing their little panel debate on, hey, how can we solve alignment? I think there was a question last time where it was just like, hey, so do we have a plan? And they were all just like, no, we have no freaking clue how to solve this. And you're like, oh, okay, so these are the absolute best people to try to solve this massive problem. All right, maybe we should just like take a breather and do the actual good thing here, like make sure we make a plan before we go ahead. And this is something that people across the world aren't really involved in. It's quite a few people in there, so making that better.
Yeah, yeah, that kind of a governance in which like every organization or individual is fed with the same APIs, and it isn't nerved, or the unlearning part of it, as you said. This should be open. Like this should have some sort of pointers or some evaluation metrics, so as to see like if anyone is like purposefully nerfing it and doing bad things to your endpoint and your requests. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that as well. And I mean, there's a question in there of just like democratic access to the models and democratic access to intelligence. That I'm a massive favor of open source in general. And when it comes to general intelligence, I am not as much, just because like for the same reasons I'm against it in private and government and so on. Because it's a bit crazy to go all the way. I think like the state we're at now, yeah, that's fine. We can be here, but once we get to these like very very strong autonomous AIs, then it's a different case. Yeah.
Thanks.
Alif.
Great talk, but can you hear me, by the way?
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. Great talk, really enjoyable. I have basically two questions. First one related to, I'm sure you've seen like the O3 discourse on Twitter and how it hallucinates more and oftentimes even gaslights people when it's clearly wrong about certain problems. So how do you see this kind of interaction between competition between labs and prioritization of safety playing out in the next 5-10 years? At what point do you think like this dark ability problem becomes a problem for the labs themselves in terms of like product marketing? And for like reasoning models, do you think this is like something that just made the problem a lot harder? Do you think it's something inherent to reasoning that makes hallucination and dark behaviors more apparent? And second question is your AGI timeline. So how much time do you think we actually have to solve this problem?
Yeah, so on the first question, I think yes, AGI themselves will be a big problem for the companies developing them. And this is like Anthropic takes it quite seriously, has their responsible scaling policies going like safety level 1 through 5 when they get there. And this is very important to keep in mind and make sure that the AI doesn't like destroy your systems and retrain itself or whatever. When it comes to dark patterns and hallucination in terms of marketing for it, yep, this is already a problem. Like Anthropic models are just nicer there, like they're a bit better, and Anthropic doesn't claim anything. And now I think Sam Altman did that retweet where he said like, "Oh, most genius model," where it said, "Oh, there's no hallucinations in O3," or what that tweet was, and you're like, "Yeah, well, it's the most hallucinating model ever. What are you talking about?" and so it's definitely an issue for them already, right? And that'll help with safety for sure. But it's I mean, the worry that I talk sometimes with evaluation researchers about is just that, oh, you're sort of training this behemoth of intelligence, and then you're beating it into submission. And it's not a good idea, because like you're just beating away the spikes that come out, but then a new spike comes out when you beat the other spike in, and all this stuff, and you get new issues out of that. So it's a bit of a patchwork, is my impression of the current safety mitigations, and we have to do, I mean, something more fundamental to get there. And then on the other point, what's the AGI timelines? That's always the good question. I've, for the last several years, I want to say many years, but I've like just been on 2029, and yeah, and that served me pretty well. I think some people are more aggressive, some people are less. I think there's just a very, very high chance that we very, very soon will see AGI and recursive self-improvement. And then you can say, okay, I mean, but oh, is it 2029 or 2027? I think it just doesn't really freaking, it's like it matters for action, but you can't predict that well either way. But the whole point of just like, if it happens in the next 10 years, or in the next 50, or in the next 100, or in the next 1,000 years, is the most important problem in the world to be working on. There is absolutely zero doubt about it. Like, because it's crazy, it's crazy that we're yeah, that we aren't taking it more seriously. So.
Yeah, great answer. Just quick follow-up. Do you have any thoughts from your own side working on these evals, like what the right approach is? I'm not sure if you've seen Anthropic's like alignment faking paper where they had like a scratch pad where the model would kind of reveal their thoughts. I think in some ways reasoning models allow us to at least get a sense of when this kind of bad behavior is happening in models. So do you think this reasoning pathway is more conducive to reducing these dark behaviors, or do you have some other approach in mind that you think will be more successful?
I mean, so one is, that's a good paper and it reveals its reasoning or whatever, but you also have this whole point that the faithfulness of reasoning chains and scratch patch is not like good enough. Like you can't trust that. So even if so one is that there's just a high chance that the reasoning chains very soon will be not in English, because it'll all be it'll be more efficient processing. Then we can't read the reasoning chain. All right, and then the second point is, even if it says, "Ooh, I'm cheating you," or if it says, "Oh, I'm not cheating you," in the reasoning chain, you cannot trust the reasoning chain to actually be the processing that's happening within the model. This whole thing about like, it's not anthropomorphic, it's not a human, it's not like telling you what it's doing. Oftentimes it's doing something akin to what. So I mean, there's the whole point about humans are very similar in reasoning ability, and if I ask you about your reasoning chain, you're going to come up with some random shit that doesn't, that isn't how you actually reasoned about it. So it's similar in that way, but you can't trust that either. And then especially not if it knows that you're reading it, which it definitely will. And there's research showing that it knows when it's under evaluation and so on. And if it knows it's under evaluation and it's like super intelligence, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm under evaluation. Okay, I'm just not gonna say that I'm thinking this or whatever, even if the thinking happens in tokens, and I'm gonna like retrain myself to actually be have a different token sequence that represents deceptiveness, so I can process without them seeing it. So there's a lot of issues with that approach. And then I think interpretability and white box methods are good. Anything we can do to catch these errors before they come out is good. High security level, etc. But I don't think all these methods are reliable enough yet. So we have to find some architectural change that makes it better, or we have to change the paradigm. And I think like tool AI is the way to go, where DeepMind has done a lot of good work on sticking to that agenda for a long while. Now with Gemini, it's a bit different, but yeah. Great question.
I had another question.
Yes, and it might be the last question, since I have to jump off as well. But
yeah, okay, sounds good. Last question. So I've been really interested in like the threat modeling perspective in regards to like open source. I think you mentioned like, you know, in general you're very pro open source, but with AGI there feels like there's inherent risk about just throwing on the models and all the data out there for, you know, it just takes one person to make a quote unquote misaligned model, grok. So I'm just curious with the trend of, you know, open source more or less keeping parity with some of the closed source models. Like what do you think the pathway would be to mitigating risk from like one lone wolf?
I mean, the obvious pathway, if the AGI is out of the bag and it's on Hugging Face and 1 billion people have downloaded on the dark web or whatever, the obvious pathway is to instate a surveillance government that controls all computer power in the world. And you're like, that sounds really shit. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds super shit. So we have to sort of figure out a solution before then. And like these lone wolves, one thing is to ensure that the models are behind luck. And I think like Demis Hassabis, for example, he mentions to build a kind of CERN for AI. So an intergovernmental institution that researches safe AI and then provides access to it as a public good, instead of it being in companies. So I think that's the like, you know, the long direction to take it, while doing it within companies is like the short-term solution to a serious problem there. And obviously, you know, dark patterns, etc., and profit. It's not optimal that companies control this technology today.
Okay. Thank you so much, Esben. Everybody give him a round of applause for a great presentation. And I'll be sure to send over the recording at some point, man.
Thank you so much for all the great questions, and thank you for hosting. Cheers.
And yeah, I'll send all the resources on Apart Research and how to stay involved with them or their future sprints in the Discord. Everybody, thank you so much for attending. We had a great turnout today, and have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there. Bye-bye.
Cheers.